truth bombs were lobbed by Tulsi Gabbard during her hearing with the, this one took place this morning. It was in front of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. And gosh, I got to tell you, this is the best Tulsi's ever sounded. I've heard her talk many times. Interviewed her several times, have talked to her, in person on the phone. This is the best she's ever sounded. I think she nailed it today. I think she showed them that they're a group of rabid conspiracy theorists. Let's play this. Tulsi, this is the part of her opening speech. She gave about a 9-minute opening speech, and this is towards the tail end, where she calls all of them out for being giant conspiracy theorists, claiming that she's a puppet of Assad and Putin and everybody.
Before I close, I want to warn the American people who are watching at home. You may hear lies and smears in this hearing that'll challenge my loyalty to and my love for our country. Those who oppose my nomination imply that I am loyal to something or someone other than God, my own conscience, and the Constitution of the United States. Accusing me of being Trump's puppet, Putin's puppet, Assad's puppet, a guru's puppet, Modi's puppet, not recognizing the absurdity of simultaneously being the puppet of 5 different puppet masters. The same tactic was used against President Trump and failed. The American people elected President Trump with a decisive victory and mandate for change. The fact is, what truly unsettles my political opponents is I refuse to be their puppet.
Excellent. Calling them out for all of their bullshit. They've been calling her an asset or a puppet for so long with absolutely no evidence. This is somebody who's deployed 3 times to combat. She is a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army Reserves. She served as a congresswoman. She's got a long list of many patriotic attributes. I don't agree with Tulsi on everything. I've definitely had my differences. After being a big supporter of Tulsi's, I think she might be the only politician I've ever donated to, the only political campaign I've ever donated to. But after being a big supporter of hers, definitely stopped my support of Tulsi for a variety of reasons, mostly for the rabid anti, I guess, anti-Islam, right? The Islamophobia, I suppose, is what I would, just supportive of drones and war as long as it's not regime change. I mean, she's kind of got this nuanced view of which war she's okay with and which one she's not okay with. Her flip-flopping on Israel, there's a lot of things that I have a lot of criticisms on Tulsi about, but today she killed it. She just killed it. This is where in her opening statement, she talked about all of the intelligence failures and abuses.
At a time when trust in the intelligence community, unfortunately, is at an all-time low. Chuck Schumer admitted a few years ago, quote, "You take on the intelligence community, they have 6 ways from Sunday at getting back at you." For too long, faulty, inadequate, or weaponized intelligence have led to costly failures and the undermining of our national security and God-given freedoms enshrined in the Constitution. The most obvious example of one of these failures is our invasion of Iraq based upon a total fabrication or complete failure of intelligence. This disastrous decision led to the deaths of tens of thousands of American soldiers, millions of people in the Middle East, mass migration, destabilization, and undermining of the security and stability of our European allies, the rise of ISIS, strengthening of al-Qaeda and other Islamist jihadist groups, and strengthening Iran. Here are just a few other examples. The American people elected Donald Trump as their president not once but twice. And yet the FBI and intelligence agencies were politicized by his opponents to undermine his presidency and falsely portray him as a puppet of Putin. Title I of FISA was used illegally to obtain a warrant to spy on Trump campaign advisor Carter Page, using a Clinton campaign-funded false dossier as their so-called evidence. Biden campaign advisor Tony Blinken was the impetus for the 51 former senior intelligence officials' letter dismissing Hunter Biden's laptop as disinformation specifically to help Biden win the election. Former DNI James Clapper lied to this committee in 2013, denying the existence of programs that facilitated the mass collection of millions of Americans' phone and internet records, yet was never held accountable. Under John Brennan's leadership, the CIA abused its power to spy on Congress, to dodge oversight, lied about doing it until he was caught, and yet has never been held responsible. Under Biden, the FBI abused its power for political reasons to try to surveil Catholics who attend traditional Latin Mass, labeling them as quote-unquote radical traditionalist Catholics. Personally, just 24 hours after I criticized Kamala Harris and her nomination, I was placed on a secret domestic terror watch list called Quiet Skies. Sadly, there are more examples. The bottom line is this must end. President Trump's re-election is a clear mandate from the American people to break this cycle of failure, end the weaponization and politicization of the intelligence community, and begin to restore trust in those who've been charged with the critical task of securing our nation.
Yeah, a lot of failures there in the intelligence community. So let's get to the criticisms that these unhinged Democrats lobbed at her. This one comes from Senator Moran, Republican from Kansas, asking her about making sure that in her heart, Russia's not going to get it, basically accusing her of being some sort of a loyalist to Russia. And she's offended by that question, as she should be.
I want to make certain that in no way does Russia get a pass in either your mind or your heart, or in any policy recommendation you would make or not make.
Senator, I'm offended by the question because my sole focus, commitment, and responsibility is about our own nation, our own security, and the interests of the American people. In carrying out the responsibilities of the Director of National Intelligence, if confirmed, no country, group, or individual will get a pass in my fulfilling that responsibility of providing that full intelligence picture so that you all can make the best informed policy decisions for the safety, security, and freedom of the American people. You have my commitment to be completely objective, unbiased, and apolitical, and I hope you understand my commitment to our country's interest.
So 3 of the senators decided to go after her about Edward Snowden. We've got 2 of them here for you, but there was a third. So they just kept asking about Edward Snowden over and over. And Edward Snowden knew in advance that she was going to be grilled about him. He tweeted this out. He said, advice for Tulsi. Tulsi Gabbard will be required to disown all prior support for whistleblowers as a condition of confirmation today. I encourage her to do so. Tell them I harmed national security and the sweet, soft feelings of staff in D.C. That's what passes for the Pledge of Allegiance. So he tells her, go ahead, disavow. But she doesn't. They try to get her. Here is Senator Warner, a Democrat from Virginia, asking her about Edward Snowden.
Simple yes or no question. Do you still think Edward Snowden is brave?
Mr. Vice Chairman, Edward Snowden broke the law. I do not agree with or support with all of the information and intelligence that he released, nor the way in which he did it. There would have been opportunities for him to come to you on this committee or seek out the IG to release that information. The fact is, he also, even as he broke the law, released information that exposed egregious, illegal, and unconstitutional programs that are happening within our government that led to serious reforms that Congress undertook.
Chairman, we got 5 minutes. So I take your answer, and these are your quotes. Brave, please join my bipartisan legislation calling for charges to be dropped against him. Do you disagree that legislation was not appropriate? Do you believe he is brave or not?
Yeah,
back those words?
Once again, Senator, Edward Snowden broke the law. He also released information that exposed the United States government's illegal
your legislation and your words are still your beliefs. Yes or no, please.
I'm making myself very clear. Edward Snowden broke the law. He released information about the United States government's illegal activities. If I may just finish my thoughts, Senator. In this role that I've been nominated for, confirmed as Director of National Intelligence, I will be responsible for protecting our nation's secrets, and I have 4 immediate steps that I would take to prevent another Snowden-like leak.
Ma'am, I would simply ask you again. I don't think you're going to answer. I agree with Tom Cotton. He's a traitor. You, for years, until you got chosen by President Trump, have celebrated this guy as brave. You've called for him to be pardoned, for his charges to be dropped. I cannot imagine a director of national intelligence that would say that kind of behavior is okay. How would we maintain the trust of the IC and the contractors who work for it? How would we maintain the trust of our Five Eyes partners? I find it very troubling.
Yeah, how do we maintain the trust of our Five Eyes partners when they find out through Edward Snowden that we've been spying on them? Yeah, it's Edward Snowden's fault that you were spying on them, right? Do you notice how he interrupts her the minute she starts talking about what Edward Snowden exposed? The minute she says, yeah, maybe he broke the law, but he was exposing the US government breaking the law. And the minute she goes into the exposures, he starts cutting her off, doesn't want to hear it, doesn't want to hear that the real traitor in the room was the US government at that point. It wasn't Edward Snowden. It was the US government. They were the traitors. They were the traitors to the American people, to their Five Eyes partners. They were the traitors. But no, we've got to label Edward Snowden. Quite frankly, the law, look, I mean, I would say Edward Snowden broke the law, but it shouldn't have been a law for him to break because it shouldn't be illegal to expose crime. That should be absolutely protected. But, you know, they want to say he was a traitor, that he, they want to try to make it sound like he sold the secrets to Russia when he didn't even want to go to Russia. He wanted to go somewhere else. I mean, he wanted to come back to the United States. He didn't run off to Russia and give them all the files. He was forced into Russia. He was trying to seek asylum, I believe in Brazil is where he was headed for, and then ended up having to stay in Russia. But, you know, it's just, so here's Senator Michael Bennett. It gets worse, actually. Senator Michael Bennett gets completely unhinged and actually just starts screaming at Tulsi over Edward Snowden.
Do you believe, as the chairman of this committee believes, as the vast majority of members of our intelligence agencies believe, that Edward Snowden was a traitor to the United States of America?
Senator, if confirmed as Director of National Intelligence, I will work with you to make sure that there is not another Snowden-like leak.
Media. It's not a moment to propagate theories, conspiracy theories, or attacks on journalism in the United States. This is when you need to answer the questions of the people whose votes you're asking for to be confirmed as the chief intelligence officer of this nation. As my colleague said, this is not about you. It's about the people that serve the intelligence agencies of the United States. Is Edward Snowden a traitor to the United States of America? That is not a hard question to answer when the stakes are this high.
Senator, as someone who has
your
served
answer,
in
yes
uniform,
or no, is Edward Snowden a traitor to the United States of America?
As someone who has worn our uniform in combat, I understand how critical our national security is.
Apparently you don't. Apparently you don't.
Oh, gosh. Unhinged. I mean, he's asking her questions. Answer my question. And then he just starts screaming at her. The best moment, I would say, of Tulsi's hearing was when Mark Kelly started asking her about, support for Assad. You know, he goes into this whole, like, Assad stuff. And she gives a lesson. She gives a history lesson that I think many Americans who were watching this confirmation hearing had never heard before. And it's something that should be absolutely common knowledge to everybody, because mainstream media, quite frankly, should have been reporting on this. But of course they were not. When al-Qaeda took over Syria just recently after Bashar al-Assad was ousted, they framed them as rebels or the resistance, or, you know, they painted them in every other flowery language other than, hey guys, remember that group that attacked us on 9/11? Well, they're now in charge of Syria. We helped them and now they're our friends. Imagine that. 20 years later, after they hit us with some airplanes, they get a whole country and we help them get a whole country. And so here she is giving that education lesson.
Senator Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Colonel Gabbard, when Russia was denying us use of chemical weapons, they accused the U.S. of supporting terrorists. This is a line that Putin used frequently during the Syrian civil war as he supported Assad. Syrian officials made similar comments. They did it repeatedly. They did it in public. They did it at the United Nations. In 2016, you gave an interview in which you said, and this is a quote, "The U.S. is providing direct and indirect support to terrorist groups in order to overthrow the Syrian government." And in 2019, on the Democratic presidential debate stage, you said of President Trump, this is a quote, "This current president is continuing to betray us. We were supposed to be going after al-Qaeda, but over years now, not only have we not gone after al-Qaeda, our president is supporting al-Qaeda." So I'm interested to hear, what was your goal in saying these things? And did you consider, before saying them, the motives of Iran and Russia, what their motives might have been before making these claims?
Senator, as someone who enlisted in the military specifically because of al-Qaeda's terrorist attack on 9/11 and committing myself and my life to doing what I could to defeat these terrorists, it was shocking and a betrayal to me and every person who was killed on 9/11, their families and my brothers and sisters in uniform. When, as a member of Congress, I learned about President Obama's dual programs that he had begun really to overthrow the regime of Syria, and being willing to, through the CIA's Timber Sycamore program that has now been made public, of working with and arming and equipping al-Qaeda in an effort to overthrow that regime, starting yet another regime change war in the Middle East. DoD train and equip program, again, begun under President Obama, is widely been known, looked at, and studied, that ultimately resulted in over $500 million being used to train who they called moderate rebels, but were actually fighters working with and aligned with al-Qaeda's affiliate on the ground in Syria, all to move forward with their regime change and not acknowledging what was obvious at the time and what has unfortunately borne true, which was that a regime change war in Syria, much like the regime change wars in Iraq, the toppling of Gaddafi and Mubarak, while these are all dictators, would likely result in the rise of Islamist extremists like al-Qaeda taking power. I shed no tears for the fall of the Assad regime, but today we have an Islamist extremist who is now in charge of Syria, as I said, who danced on the streets to celebrate the 9/11 attack, who ruled over Idlib with an Islamist extremist governance, and who has already begun to persecute and kill and arrest religious minorities like Christians in Syria.
I understand.
Why that should be acceptable to anyone is beyond me.
It shouldn't
is
be.
certainly
and
not in our
interest. I appreciate your answer, and thank you. My concern has to do with the tendency to repeat Russian and Syrian, and even in some cases, I think we'll get into in the closed session, Iranian information, and to discount what comes from our intelligence community.
Senator, every American deserves to know that people in our own government were providing support to our sworn enemy, al-Qaeda. That should not be acceptable by anyone.
Listen to him, Mark Kelly there, after she gives that whole lesson. And he's like, I appreciate that, but these are all Russian and Iranian talking points. No, they're not. They're the truth. It's just the truth. And if Russia and Iran happen to point out the truth, then that doesn't make it Russian and Iranian talking points. That just makes it the truth. And that should be everybody's talking point. The truth should be everybody's talking point. But no, the U.S. would rather, if Iran and Russia are telling the truth, then we have to cover up that truth. We can't be telling that same truth. We have to come up with a new non-truth to spew to our population that, no, it was these good rebels that have taken over Syria, that we got rid of Assad, who protected the religious minorities, and we put in these rebels that are gonna oppress women and minorities, and that's okay because we got rid of Assad. That's what this insane, absolute insanity. But wow, just that schooling that Tulsi did. And again, this was the best I'd ever heard her sound. Normally she sounds a little bit exasperated. She sounded really clear. She sounded concise. She sounded really confident. I thought she did a fantastic job throughout this hearing. I do think that she is totally and completely qualified to be the director of national intelligence. I don't agree with her on a lot of position points, but that doesn't matter. I think she's qualified, and I think she did a fantastic job during this hearing. So props to Tulsi. However, she's the least likely to get through out of the 3 that faced their committee hearings today. She's the one that they are smearing as much as possible as, like she said, a Putin puppet, Assad puppet, Iranian puppet. You know, she's a puppet for everybody. And this is somebody who is currently serving in the U.S. military with the highest security clearance, passed every single background check, was a member of Congress, and they're claiming that she's not loyal to the United States. I mean, this is how sick and twisted our mainstream media is, that has fed these lies into our puppet congressional members who can't think for themselves, but instead just have to parrot the talking points that mainstream media gives them. So we are in a broken society. This is broken. If all 3 of these guys don't get through, it's broken. It's clearly broken. None of them should be disqualified for any reason. But these members of Congress, these senators, they're just totally and completely broken. Thanks for watching this clip from the full Kim Iverson Show. If you want to watch the full show, visit KimIversonShow.com. The show airs every Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. Again, it's KimIversonShow.com. See you there.